Hello and welcome. You've memorized the chromatic dragons, those servants of Tiamat whose scales shimmer in red, blue, green, black, and white. Perhaps you've studied the metallic dragons, noble creatures of gold, silver, bronze, copper, and brass, who follow Bahamut's righteous path. But buried in the forgotten corners of Dungeons and Dragons history lives a dragon that wore two completely different faces across the editions. A creature that existed twice in utterly contradictory forms, and then vanished almost entirely from modern play. The Obsidian Dragon stands as one of the most fascinating examples of how the game evolved, transformed, and sometimes abandoned its own creations. Tonight, you'll journey through time itself, from the frozen wastelands of 1989 to the volcanic chambers of 2003, discovering why this draconic lineage roared twice in completely opposite voices, and then fell silent. The first Obsidian Dragon emerged on a summer day in 1989. Dragon Magazine issue 146 arrived at game stores and subscribers' mailboxes, bearing the confident tagline, 13 years and still on top. Advanced Dungeons and Dragons reigned supreme in those days, and the magazine served as an essential supplement, offering new monsters, character options, and campaign ideas that dungeon masters eagerly incorporated into their games. Within this particular issue's pages, an article titled "The Dragon's Bestiary." All dragons, great and small, introduced readers to several exotic draconic species. Among the new additions, the Cobra Dragon, Grey Dragon, Rainbow Dragon, Dracon, and Minidragon. One creature would eventually become the subject of confusion and contradiction: the Obsidian Dragon. But in that original incarnation, nothing about the Obsidian Dragon suggested volcanic fury or gemstone heritage. Instead, the article presented Obsidian Dragons as denizens of the frozen north, creatures who came from a land of black ice. These first Obsidian Dragons appeared in most physical respects similar to silver dragons, sharing comparable body structure, wing configuration, and overall silhouette. Picture a dragon built along graceful lines, powerful yet elegant, its form suggesting both strength and aerial agility. But where silver dragons shimmered with metallic brightness, Obsidian Dragons displayed scales of deep metallic black accented by silver highlights. The contrast created a striking appearance, like volcanic glass catching moonlight, dark and beautiful, and somehow cold. Their size matched other great dragons of that era, with adults measuring 56 feet in length from snout to tail tip. This placed them firmly among the major draconic species, large enough to threaten entire settlements, yet small enough to navigate mountain passes and cavern systems with relative ease. What truly set these original Obsidian Dragons apart involved their moral character. The 1980s saw advanced Dungeons and Dragons firmly committed to its alignment system, and dragons typically fell into predictable categories. Chromatics embodied evil, metallics represented good, and few exceptions complicated these simple divisions. Obsidian dragons broke this mold entirely. They spanned the entire lawful alignment spectrum, with approximately 65% manifesting lawful good alignments, 25% claiming lawful neutrality, and only 10% embracing lawful evil. This distribution made them predominantly benevolent creatures, more likely to aid worthy adventurers than threaten innocent settlements. Based on the article's description of their origins in a land of black ice, this likely referred to Greyhawk's frozen northern regions on the continent of Oaric, though the text didn't explicitly confirm this geographic placement. Some who studied these dragons speculated they might represent a more powerful evolutionary branch of the silver dragon family tree. Given their physical similarities and overlapping alignment tendencies, their breath weapon reflected their icy homeland and fundamentally cold nature. When an obsidian dragon inhaled deeply and exhaled its primary attack, it produced a cone of black acidic frost, 90 feet long, with a 30-foot base at its widest point. This wasn't simple cold or simple acid, but a devastating fusion of both. This wasn't just cold. It was a lethal combination where the frost froze victims solid while the acid ate through their armor. The black frost clung to surfaces and creatures, creating patches of dangerous terrain that combined freezing temperatures with ongoing acid damage. These dragons could employ this terrifying weapon 3 times per day, giving them remarkable sustained combat capability. But the black acidic frost represented only their primary breath weapon. 3 times per day, these obsidian dragons could exhale something even stranger: a membranous web of black ice. The dragon projected a 10-foot diameter sphere that could fly up to 60 feet away with remarkable accuracy. When this sphere struck its target, the web expanded rapidly, encasing victims in 5 to 8 feet of solid black ice within seconds. The ice imprisoned creatures completely, holding them immobile while the cold sapped their strength and consciousness. Trapped victims faced multiple dangers simultaneously. They had to make a second saving throw to keep their faces from being covered by the ice. Those who failed this save would suffocate in 2 to 5 rounds, unless they could summon the extraordinary strength required to break free. Escaping required succeeding at a bend bars or lift gates roll, one of the most difficult strength checks in advanced Dungeons and Dragons. Allies could attempt rescue by attacking the ice itself, which possessed armor class 4 and required at least 12 hit points of damage to breach. However, this rescue attempt carried its own terrible risk. 1/4 of all damage inflicted on the ice transferred directly to the imprisoned victim, meaning overzealous rescuers might kill those they sought to save. Beyond these fearsome breath weapons, the lawful Obsidian Dragons of 1989 wielded impressive magical capabilities that grew more formidable with age. Even very young specimens, barely more than hatchlings, could cast 3 first-level spells. As they matured through the standard Draconic age categories, their magical repertoire expanded dramatically. Each age category granted them access to 3 additional spells of 1 higher level, plus 1 additional spell from each lower level they'd already mastered. This progression meant that by the time an Obsidian Dragon reached ancient status, having survived for centuries in the frozen north, it could cast 10 first-level spells, 9 second-level spells, 8 third-level spells, and so on through the entire spell progression. Ancient dragons even possessed a 25% chance of knowing a single 9th level spell, placing them among the most magically potent creatures in existence. This rivaled or exceeded the capabilities of the most accomplished archmages, making ancient Obsidian Dragons as dangerous for their magical knowledge as for their physical might. Even more remarkably, 45% of magic-using Obsidian Dragons maintained spell books. This detail suggested a level of scholarly dedication and intellectual sophistication unusual among dragonkind. Rather than relying on a fixed list of spells determined at hatching or by instinct, these dragons actively studied magic, researched new spells, and selected their prepared spells for specific situations. An Obsidian Dragon anticipating combat might prepare offensive evocations and protective abjurations, while one planning negotiations might emphasize divinations and enchantments. Their physical combat capabilities matched their magical and breath weapon prowess. Obsidian Dragons employed the standard Draconic combat pattern: 2 claws, 1 bite, and 1 tail strike per round. The claws tore through armor and flesh with terrible efficiency, while the bite delivered devastating damage that could kill lesser opponents outright. The tail strike, though somewhat less powerful than the other attacks, could still shatter bones and send victims flying. This four-attack routine made them exceptionally dangerous in melee combat, capable of shredding multiple opponents simultaneously or focusing all attacks on a single powerful foe. Their exceptional intelligence meant they employed these attacks tactically rather than simply lashing out mindlessly. An Obsidian Dragon might use its breath weapon to freeze the most dangerous opponents first, then close to melee range to dispatch weaker enemies with claw and fang. It might use its magical abilities to buff itself before combat or debuff enemies during the fight. It might even attempt negotiation, using its intelligence and lawful good alignment to seek peaceful solutions when possible. Yet, despite these impressive capabilities, the original Obsidian Dragons appeared only in this single Dragon magazine article. They never received inclusion in official monster manuals or campaign setting books. They remained obscure even among dedicated Advanced Dungeons and Dragons enthusiasts, overshadowed by the more prominent metallic and chromatic dragons that dominated published adventures and official lore. A few dungeon masters who collected every issue of Dragon magazine might have incorporated Obsidian Dragons into their Greyhawk campaigns, perhaps placing one in the cold marshes or deep within the land of black ice itself. But for most players, these lawful dragons of black frost never materialized at their gaming tables. They existed in that liminal space occupied by so many Dragon magazine creatures, theoretically part of the game, technically available for use, yet practically invisible to all but the most dedicated collectors. For 14 years, from 1989 to 2003, this version of the Obsidian Dragon represented the only creature bearing that name. It was a footnote, a curiosity, a dragon that most players would never encounter, and many would never even know existed. Then the game changed. Advanced Dungeons and Dragons gave way to 3rd edition. Wizards of the Coast replaced TSR as the game's publisher, and the entire structure of Dungeons and Dragons underwent radical transformation. In this new era, with new designers and new philosophies, someone decided to resurrect the Obsidian Dragon name. But what emerged bore absolutely no resemblance to what had come before. Section 2. The Fire Dragon Rises. The year 2003 marked a very different era for Dungeons and Dragons. 3rd edition had arrived in 2000, bringing with it a complete overhaul of the game's mechanics. Wizards of the Coast, having acquired the game from the struggling TSR, rebuilt Dungeons and Dragons from the ground up. Skills replaced non-weapon proficiencies. Attack bonuses replaced THA Chiro. And the D20 system unified resolution mechanics across the entire game. Everything felt new, streamlined, modernized. This new edition also embraced digital distribution in ways the old TSR never had. The company maintained an active website where they published supplemental content, offering free articles that expanded the game beyond what print products could contain. These web supplements covered everything from new prestige classes to additional spells, from campaign setting details to expanded monster options. One particular series of articles focused on psionics, that often controversial subsystem dealing with mental powers and psychic abilities. The expanded Psionics Handbook had provided comprehensive rules for psionic characters and powers. To supplement that handbook, Wizards of the Coast published a series of web articles collectively titled Psionic Bestiary, offering creatures that embodied psionic abilities and could serve as encounters for groups incorporating psionics into their campaigns. In 2003, one of these articles introduced a creature called the Obsidian Dragon. For anyone who remembered Dragon magazine issue 146, the name would have seemed familiar. But the moment you read past that shared name, all familiarity vanished. This new Obsidian Dragon bore absolutely no connection to its predecessor, except those two words. Gone was the lawful alignment, the frozen homeland, the black acidic frost, the membranous webs of ice. In their place stood something entirely different. A fire-breathing gem dragon of volcanic fury and psionic might. To understand this new Obsidian Dragon, you first need to understand gem dragons themselves, a third category of dragonkind that stood apart from both chromatic and metallic lineages. While chromatic dragons served the five-headed Queen Tiamat and metallic dragons followed Bahamut the Platinum Dragon, gem dragons owed their allegiance to a third draconic deity, Sardir, the Ruby Dragon. The origins of Sardir varied depending on which edition's lore you consulted. 5th edition would later present him as the first creation of Bahamut and Tiamat, who together shaped the original dragons before some ancient cataclysm destroyed the first world. Earlier editions portrayed him as an active deity who wandered the astral plane in his ruby palace, maintaining ongoing relationships with gem dragons rather than existing only as fragmented echoes. Regardless of which origin story held true, all sources agreed on his appearance and nature. Sardir appeared as a massive ruby dragon, his long, sinewy body covered with deep ruby red scales that glowed with internal radiance. At a distance, many mistook him for an ancient red dragon, but his playful demeanor and sharp wit soon betrayed his true nature. Where Tiamat embodied anger and Bahamut sometimes seemed overly concerned with maintaining the status quo, Sardir displayed a cheeky, mischievous personality. He was reputed to be a great conversationalist, unprepared visitors often surprised by his engaging manner. According to the most widely told legend, Sardir was shattered at some point in Draconic history. His physical form exploded into countless fragments. His consciousness split across multiple pieces of crystallized essence. Rather than dying completely, each fragment developed its own consciousness, its own identity, eventually growing into the first of each gem dragon species. From Sardir's destruction came 5 distinct types of gem dragons, each embodying different aspects of their progenitor's shattered being. Amethyst dragons embodied wisdom and balance, dwelling deep within the elemental plane of earth, where they pursued philosophical understanding. crystal dragons displayed insatiable curiosity, claiming icy mountains and Arctic regions as their domains. Emerald dragons brought paranoid cunning to the forests and jungles they ruled, always ready to talk their way out of difficult situations. Sapphire dragons jealously guarded their underground territories with aggressive territorial instincts. Topaz dragons embraced isolation along remote coastlines, their antisocial tendencies keeping them distant from other dragonkind. All 5 species maintained various forms of neutrality: true neutral, lawful neutral, or chaotic neutral. They valued intellect over raw physical power, psionic ability over traditional magic, and philosophical contemplation over the endless good versus evil conflict that consumed chromatic and metallic dragons. The gem dragons saw themselves as sophisticated, evolved beyond the simplistic moral dichotomies that trapped their cousins in eternal warfare. In versions of the lore where Sardir survived as an active deity, he maintained his ruby palace as a gathering place for gem dragonkind. He kept a court of 5 thanes, one representing each gem dragon species. These weren't merely ambassadors, but transformed beings, chosen by Sardir himself and reshaped, body and mind, into perfect representatives of their kind. Should one perish, Sardir would simply select a suitable replacement and transform them into the new Thane. But he once had a 6th Thane. Her name was Seraides, and she represented the Obsidian Dragons. Then Sardir destroyed her. Not merely killed, not simply removed from office, but utterly annihilated. And in the same catastrophic decision, he banished every Obsidian Dragon from his court, forbidding them from his presence forever. Even Sardir's own clergy argue about the reasoning behind this action, unable to reach consensus about what crime could justify such extreme response. The sources provide no clear explanation, leaving this as one of the great mysteries of Draconic history. Based on what we know of Draconic politics and Sardir's usual tolerance, this could imply Seraides committed some extraordinary offense. Perhaps she plotted against Sardir himself, or discovered secrets he wished kept hidden, or her actions threatened the stability of gem dragon society. The truth remains lost to history or deliberately obscured, known only to Sardir, and perhaps not even to him anymore if the 5th edition lore holds true, and he truly shattered long ago. Whatever the reason, the consequences reshaped Obsidian Dragon existence forever. Cast out from the Ruby Palace, forbidden from Sardir's presence, they became pariahs among their own kind. The other gem dragon species avoided them, opposed them, treated them as dangerous aberrations within the gemstone family. This isolation and rejection appears connected to Obsidian Dragon's evil alignment, though whether the banishment caused their evil nature or resulted from it remains a matter of scholarly debate. This brings us to the fundamental difference between obsidian dragons and their gem dragon cousins. While amethyst, crystal, emerald, sapphire, and topaz dragons all maintained various forms of neutrality, obsidian dragons embraced evil with disturbing consistency. They always manifested as neutral evil creatures whose malevolence ran as deep as the volcanic chambers they called home. This wasn't the explosive, destructive evil of chromatic red dragons who burned cities for entertainment, nor the tyrannical evil of blue dragons who enslaved populations for tribute. Obsidian dragon evil manifested as cold, calculating cruelty, the patient malice of predators who planned suffering years in advance and executed their schemes with surgical precision. Their physical forms reflected this inner darkness. As hatchlings, obsidian dragon scales appeared rough, dark gray, and distinct from each other, like unpolished volcanic glass fresh from cooling lava. But as they grew over centuries, their scales changed to solid black and smoothed to the point that individual scales became difficult to distinguish. Ancient obsidian dragons appeared carved from single massive pieces of volcanic glass. Their entire bodies formed from seamless black stone that drank in light and warmth. Where other gem dragons displayed beautiful crystalline forms that reflected and refracted light, obsidian dragons absorbed it, their forms suggesting solidified darkness given draconic shape. They ranged in size from small wormlings to gargantuan great worms, progressing through 12 standard age categories over enormously long life cycles. The oldest among them stretched well over 100 feet in length, massive enough that their very presence dominated landscapes. And unlike humans, age did not diminish their strength, intelligence, or power, but had the opposite effect, making the oldest worms among the most formidable creatures in existence. Fire defined their very essence. These obsidian dragons possessed complete immunity to fire and heat, capable of swimming through molten lava or resting in volcanic vents without discomfort. Conversely, cold represented their primary vulnerability, inflicting double damage except on successful saves. Their breath weapon channeled their affinity for flame, a cone of fire that incinerated everything in its path, growing larger and more destructive with each age category. This was the Obsidian Dragon of 2003, not a lawful guardian of frozen northern wastes, but an evil psionic terror of volcanic fury. The transformation was complete and total, a reimagining so thorough that the two versions shared nothing except a name. The black ice worm of Greyhawk had been replaced by a banished gem dragon of fire, and few players would ever realize these were supposedly the same creature. Section 3. Masters of Mind and Flame. beyond their immunity to fire and their volcanic glass appearance. These reimagined obsidian dragons possessed something that set them apart from nearly every other dragon in existence: unparalleled intelligence. They were the most intelligent of all gem dragons, and gem dragons themselves already ranked among the most mentally acute creatures in the multiverse. Ancient obsidian dragons achieved intelligence scores that placed them intellectually beyond virtually all humanoid races. Their minds capable of comprehending magical and psionic concepts that would shatter lesser intellects. But this exceptional intelligence, combined with something dark and cruel, where their gem dragon cousins maintained philosophical neutrality. Obsidian dragons embraced malevolence. They were arrogant beyond measure, quick to anger despite their calculating natures, and possessed a sadistic streak that manifested in their love of toying with prey before finishing it off. This wasn't simple predatory behavior or the thoughtless cruelty of a beast. Their intelligence made it worse, allowing them to understand exactly how much suffering they inflicted and to savor that knowledge. Based on what we know of their exceptionally high intelligence, combined with their evil alignment, this suggests they spent considerable time studying their victims before striking. They would observe potential prey from a distance, learning patterns of behavior, identifying weaknesses, cataloging fears. When they finally attacked, they did so with every advantage firmly in their grasp, engineering encounters, where escape became nearly impossible and defeat almost certain. Their psionic abilities reflected their mental superiority and gave them tools that other dragons simply didn't possess. These powers manifested progressively as the dragons aged, each life stage unlocking new mental capabilities. Young obsidian dragons developed firefall, creating cascades of psychic flame to engulf enemies. Juveniles gained biofeedback, converting mental energy into physical resilience that hardened their already formidable hides. Young adults manifested Burning Ray, projecting focused beams of psychic fire at distant targets. As they matured further, their psionic repertoire expanded into truly impressive territory. Adults could invoke Whitefire, flames so intensely hot they burned white instead of the traditional orange or red. Mature adults gained Wall of Ectoplasm, creating barriers of solidified psychic matter. Old dragons developed ectoplasmic armor, wrapping themselves in layers of psychically generated protection. Very old dragons manifested Flaming Shroud, surrounding themselves with auras of fire that burned anyone who approached too closely. Ancient obsidian dragons unlocked one of their most feared abilities, Plane Shift, which they could use 3 times per day. This wasn't merely a means of escape, though it certainly served that purpose when battles turned against them. The true terror lay in how they weaponized this ability against their enemies. An obsidian dragon could snatch a single opponent in its claws and instantly transport both itself and its victim to the plane of fire. That realm of eternal combustion where flames formed the fundamental building block of reality. The dragon, completely immune to fire, would watch as the environment itself incinerated its helpless prisoner. Then it would plane shift back to continue the fight, leaving behind only ash. The oldest obsidian dragons, those worms and great worms who'd survived beyond even the ancient stage, gained access to even more extraordinary powers. Mind Store allowed them to preserve memories and knowledge within crystallized psychic constructs, creating external repositories of information that could outlast the dragon's physical death. And once per day, the eldest great worms could manifest Genesis itself, the power to create entire demiplanes. Their psionic abilities revolved around the discipline of metacreativity, using mental force to create and shape objects from nothing. Additionally, obsidian dragons manifested powers similarly to a scion of the metacreativity discipline, their manifestor level increasing as they aged. This progression gave them access to a wide array of metacreative powers beyond their innate abilities, allowing them to reshape reality itself through thought alone. They also wielded psionic attack and defense modes. Their attack mode employed mind thrust, a focused lance of psionic energy that could stun or kill opponents whose mental defenses proved insufficient. Their defense mode utilized Thought Shield, creating mental barriers that deflected psionic assaults from other creatures with mental abilities. In combat against other psionic beings, obsidian dragons could wage war on two fronts simultaneously: physical and mental. Like all true dragons, they radiated a fear-inducing aura that affected creatures who came too close. They possessed spell resistance that increased with age, making them exceptionally difficult to affect with magic. Their physical attacks remained devastating. Bites that could kill with a single snap, claws that tore through armor like parchment, wings and tails that could batter multiple opponents simultaneously. Their approach to combat reflected their intelligence. Obsidian dragons were unafraid of battle, making rapid analyses of their opponents in seconds and attacking accordingly. They preferred to start engagements using their breath weapon and ranged psionic attacks, softening opponents before closing to melee range for physical assaults. But they weren't reckless. When facing foes too powerful to quickly overpower, they demonstrated the wisdom to retreat, setting up ambushes or gathering advantages before re-engaging. A tactic they particularly favored involved that plane shift ability. They would snatch an enemy and transport them to the plane of fire or to their personal demiplane if they'd created one hostile enough to serve as an execution chamber. This separated enemy groups, eliminated dangerous spellcasters or warriors before they could turn the tide of battle, and demonstrated the dragon's power to surviving witnesses. Their relationships with other creatures reflected their evil nature and outcast status. Following the destruction of Serides and the banishment from Sardyr's court, Obsidian Dragons found themselves avoided and opposed by the other gem dragon species. Their evil nature, exceptional among gem dragons, was often connected to this fall from grace, though whether the banishment caused their evil or resulted from it remained unclear. This could imply a cycle of rejection and bitterness, where exile bred cruelty and cruelty justified continued exile. They existed in isolation, too evil to ally with neutral gem dragons, yet too distinct from chromatic dragons to join Tiamat's followers. They occupied a category of one, outcasts among outcasts, rejected by the very family they should have belonged to. Based on their intelligence and their documented cruelty, this suggests they blamed others for their circumstances rather than examining their own natures. They likely plotted revenge against Sardyr, though whether any ever came close to achieving such an impossible goal remained unknown. This combination of exceptional intelligence, devastating psionic power, complete fire immunity, and calculating evil made Obsidian Dragons uniquely dangerous. They weren't the physically strongest dragons. That honor belonged to the great chromatic and metallic worms. They weren't the most magically powerful, lacking the extensive spellcasting capabilities of ancient metallics, but they possessed advantages in versatility and tactical acumen that few other dragons could match. An Obsidian Dragon that decided to destroy, you wouldn't charge in blindly. It would study you, learn your weaknesses, prepare the battlefield, and strike only when victory seemed certain. Section 4. Layers of liquid stone. The environments Obsidian Dragons chose for their lairs reflected both their volcanic nature and their need for absolute security. On the material plane, they claimed warm mountainous or underground locations, particularly those near active volcanoes. These weren't merely preferences born of comfort, though their fire immunity certainly made volcanic regions pleasant homes. The choice carried strategic significance. A volcanic lair provided natural defenses that eliminated most threats before they reached the dragon itself. The extreme heat killed or weakened intruders who lacked magical protection. Toxic gases released by volcanic activity poisoned the air, forcing adventurers to navigate choking fumes and noxious vapors. The unstable geology created deadly hazards where one wrong step could plunge victims into pools of molten rock or trigger cave-ins that buried entire parties under tons of stone. An Obsidian Dragon resting in the deepest chamber of its volcanic lair, enjoyed protection that rivaled the most elaborate magical wards. The most impressive material plane layers featured flowing lava or magma, systems of volcanic caverns where molten rock served as both decoration and defense. Based on their documented intelligence and tactical nature, this suggests obsidian dragons learned to manipulate these lava flows, redirecting them to create barriers or flooding passages to eliminate pursuing enemies. Some reportedly triggered small eruptions deliberately, weaponizing the very mountain they called home. But many obsidian dragons established their primary lairs elsewhere entirely. The plane of fire beckoned, with promises of perfect security and environmental conditions. This elemental plane consisted entirely of flames, heat, and combustion, where fire existed as the fundamental building block of reality. For most creatures, even brief exposure meant instant incineration. For obsidian dragons, it represented paradise. They moved through the plane of fire's hostile environment with casual ease, their complete fire immunity rendering them invulnerable to dangers that would vaporize other dragons instantly. They established lairs in coal mountains, geological formations unique to that plane, where vast coal seems burned continuously in an environment already dominated by flame. These coal mountains offered advantages beyond even material plane volcanoes. The perpetual fires required no maintenance. The hostile environment drove away nearly all potential intruders, and the very location demonstrated the dragon's power to those few creatures who could survive there. On the inner planes, obsidian dragons preferred specific regions within the plane of fire. The Sea of Fire, or the Fountains of Creation. These areas, while still lethally hostile to most life, contained stable enough conditions for obsidian dragons to carve permanent lairs. From these extraplanar strongholds, they could access exotic materials found only in fire-dominated environments, potentially negotiate with or dominate fire elementals and other native creatures, and enjoy security that made their lairs nearly impregnable. The eldest obsidian dragons took security even further. Great worms who'd mastered the Genesis power created personal demoplanes, pocket realities existing outside normal planar geography. These finite planes had limited access, their creation requiring the dragon to manifest the power while on the ethereal plane. The fledgling plane would grow from a local density fluctuation, drawing substance from surrounding ethereal vapors and protomatter, until it reached its maximum radius. During creation, the dragons specified every environmental parameter: atmosphere, temperature, terrain, even the fundamental nature of reality within that space. Based on obsidian dragon preferences and their documented love of volcanic environments. This suggests they created realms of impossible geological wonders. Rivers of lava that flowed uphill, obsidian formations that grew like living crystals, atmospheres superheated beyond natural limits. Within these demoplanes, great worm obsidian dragons achieved something approaching godhood over their limited domains. They could live indefinitely in blissful isolation, generating food for themselves through psionic manifestation. They reshaped the landscape according to whim, raising mountains one day and reducing them to plains the next. Based on their documented cruelty and intelligence, this suggests some imprisoned enemies in environments specifically designed to maximize suffering, creating scenarios where victims experienced false hope of escape, only to discover each apparent exit led deeper into nightmare. Regional effects manifested around obsidian dragon lairs, warping the surrounding environment in ways that reflected the dragon's presence. Magma geysers became common within 1 mile of the lair, often creating dangerous lava flows that hardened into beautiful obsidian formations. Rocky fissures could form portals to the elemental plane of fire, allowing creatures of elemental flame into the world to dwell nearby. These effects made obsidian dragon territories recognizable from a distance and created additional hazards for anyone approaching. Yet despite these elaborate lairs and impressive capabilities, obsidian dragons appeared rarely, if at all, in published adventures and campaign materials. The 3rd edition Psionic Bestiary article existed primarily as a web supplement rather than printed material, limiting its distribution to those who actively sought it online. No major adventure modules featured obsidian dragons as antagonists or significant encounters that can be found in available sources. No campaign setting books devoted substantial coverage to obsidian dragon lore, culture, or ecology. This meant most dungeon masters never encountered obsidian dragons in official materials. They might never know obsidian dragons existed at all unless they specifically searched for psionic creatures or stumbled across the web article by chance. Players faced red dragons in volcanic lairs instead, creatures that filled similar ecological niches without requiring dungeon masters to learn psionic subsystems. The specialized knowledge required to use obsidian dragons effectively created barriers to their inclusion. A dungeon master needed to understand psionic powers, metacreativity disciplines, manifestor levels, and how psionic combat differed from magical or physical combat. Many dungeon masters, already juggling complex campaign narratives and multiple player characters, chose simpler antagonists from core rulebooks rather than learning entirely new subsystems for a single encounter. The occasional dungeon master who discovered the Psionic Bestiary article and incorporated Obsidian Dragons into campaigns, likely created memorable encounters. The combination of draconic power, psionic abilities, and evil intelligence created multidimensional threats that challenged parties in novel ways. An Obsidian Dragon employing its exceptional intelligence might engineer encounters where every advantage lay with the dragon, or use plane shift to create dramatic moments where groups had to choose between pursuing objectives or mounting rescue operations. But these remained exceptions rather than the rule. Obsidian Dragons existed in a strange liminal space within 3rd Edition's cosmology. Officially part of Gem Dragon taxonomy, excluded from Sardyr's court, shunned by other gem species, too evil for neutral allies, and too distinct for chromatic coalitions. This isolation in the lore mirrored their isolation in actual gameplay. They were creatures that technically existed, but rarely manifested at gaming tables. Dragons whose roar most players would never hear. And that obscurity, that marginal existence in 3rd Edition, sealed their fate when the game moved forward into new eras. Because if few people used Obsidian Dragons when they had official support, what hope did they have when that support vanished entirely? Section 5. The Obsidian Silence. When 4th Edition Dungeons and Dragons arrived in 2008, it brought sweeping changes that affected every aspect of the game. Wizards of the Coast had decided to rebuild the system from the ground up once again, streamlining mechanics, consolidating subsystems, and eliminating options they deemed too complex or insufficiently popular. The designers made hard choices about what to keep and what to leave behind. Psionics survived this transition, but in heavily modified form that bore little resemblance to 3rd Edition's implementation. The elaborate PowerPoint systems, the manifestor levels, the disciplines and subdisciplines, all underwent radical simplification or replacement. The psionic bestiary web articles, including the Obsidian Dragon entry, received no official 4th Edition update that can be found in available sources. Obsidian Dragons simply disappeared from the game. Absent from 4th Edition monster manuals and dragon-focused supplements. They weren't alone in this vanishing act. Gem Dragons as a whole suffered during 4th Edition. Their presence diminished compared to earlier eras. Even the traditional 5 gem species, amethyst, crystal, emerald, sapphire, and topaz, became less visible, recognized primarily by players who'd experienced earlier editions. Obsidian Dragons, already marginal in 3rd Edition, with only a web supplement to their name, vanished completely in an edition that barely acknowledged Gem Dragons existed. The release of 5th Edition in 2014 initially offered no relief. The core monster manual included extensive dragon content, devoting page after page to chromatic and metallic species. But gem dragons remained absent. Chromatic dragons reclaimed their positions as iconic villains. Metallic dragons served as noble allies and challenging encounters. And the third category of dragonkind seemed forgotten entirely. For years, players who remembered gem dragons from earlier editions requested their return. Online forums filled with discussions and speculation. Would gem dragons fit 5th edition's streamlined design philosophy? How might their psionic abilities translate to a system that had deliberately minimized psionics? Which of their distinctive features should be preserved or modified? Wizards of the Coast remained noncommittal, occasionally hinting that gem dragons might return, but providing no concrete timeline. Then came October of 2021. Fizban's Treasury of Dragons was announced, a supplement promising comprehensive dragon content that would expand 5th edition's Draconic options with new mechanics, extensive lore, and variant dragon types. The marketing materials confirmed what fans had hoped for. Gem dragons would finally join 5th edition's official bestiary. Players who'd advocated for gem dragons' return celebrated. Veterans anticipated reunion with creatures they'd missed for over a decade. Newcomers looked forward to experiencing these psionic crystalline worms for the first time. When Fizban's Treasury finally released, it delivered on its promise. The book devoted substantial page count to gem dragon lore, mechanics, and variants. It detailed their connection to Sardir, explained their psionic abilities through a streamlined spell-like system, and provided statistics for using them as allies or antagonists. But the gem dragon section included only 5 species: amethyst, crystal, emerald, sapphire, and topaz. The traditional lineup from 2nd edition onward received full treatment. Each got detailed descriptions, ecology information, statistics for every age category, and integration into 5th edition's cosmology. The book even included sapphire dragons, which had been the first gem dragon released in 5th edition through an earlier charity stat block. Obsidian dragons received no mention whatsoever. Before the book's release, an article on D&D Beyond had addressed this very question under the heading, "What about obsidian dragons?" The article acknowledged that technically, there existed a 6th type of gem dragon, the Obsidian Dragon, describing them as the cruelest and most intelligent of gem dragons, who enjoyed making their prey suffer and made their homes in volcanoes. However, the author noted these dragons hadn't appeared in earlier 5th edition previews, and guessed they wouldn't appear in Fizban's Treasury. That prediction proved accurate. The book's Gem Dragon chapter never acknowledged Obsidian Dragon existence. The sections covering Sardir and his court made no reference to Serades or the ancient banishment the discussion of gem dragon varieties, alignments, and characteristics proceeded as though obsidian dragons had never been created. For players whose only experience with Dungeons and Dragons came from 5th edition, obsidian dragons simply don't exist. The reasons for this exclusion likely involved multiple overlapping factors. The designers may have wanted to focus on the traditional 5-gem dragon species that had appeared consistently since 2nd edition, giving each adequate coverage rather than spreading limited page count across 6 species. Obsidian Dragon's evil alignment conflicted with Gem Dragon's neutral positioning, creating tonal inconsistencies within the category. The complicated lore surrounding Serades and the banishment required substantial explanation that would consume space better devoted to other content. From a mechanical perspective, obsidian dragons overlapped significantly with red dragons. Both favored volcanic lairs, both breathed fire, both possessed immunity to heat and vulnerability to cold. 5th edition already included red dragons in the core monster manual, providing a well-supported option for volcanic dragon encounters. Adding obsidian dragons might have seemed redundant, offering little that red dragons couldn't already provide except psionic abilities that 5th edition had deliberately simplified. This simplification created its own obstacle. 3rd edition obsidian dragons relied heavily on meta-creativity powers, manifestor levels, and elaborate psionic subsystems. 5th edition's Fizban's Treasury gave gem dragons access to a small number of spells to represent their psionic nature. A streamlined approach emphasizing accessibility. Converting obsidian dragon's extensive psionic repertoire to this simpler system would require either stripping away their psionic identity or creating special rules that applied only to them. Neither option would have been particularly appealing from a design standpoint. Perhaps most significantly, obsidian dragons lacked the nostalgic constituency that other gem dragons enjoyed. Players who'd experienced 2nd edition remembered amethyst, crystal, emerald, sapphire, and topaz dragons from that era. These 5 species had appeared in multiple supplements and earned places in the game's collective memory. Obsidian dragons appeared only in a single 3rd edition web article. Few voices demanded their return because few players remembered they existed in the first place. But the exclusion didn't erase obsidian dragons entirely. One Reddit user posted in November of 2021, shortly after Fizban's Treasury released. I recently obtained Fizban's Treasury of Dragons and couldn't help but notice a distinct lack of obsidian dragons. They expressed disappointment that nothing was mentioned despite the lore potential, and created their own 5th edition stat block. Another user commented, I was also surprised that WoTC left out Obsidian Dragons, considering they're the most interesting plot hook gem dragons originally had. These homebrewed versions preserve Obsidian Dragon legacy through fan creativity. They typically retain the fire breath, volcanic lair preferences, and evil alignment, while adapting psionic abilities to 5th edition's simpler mechanics. Some add abilities to differentiate them from red dragons, incorporating limited plane shifting or psychic powers. Others lean into the tragic lore, portraying them as bitter outcasts whose evil stems partly from centuries of rejection. Online communities occasionally discuss Obsidian Dragons, sharing memories of 3rd edition or speculating about their exclusion. These discussions keep the concept alive, even absent official support. New players occasionally discover references while researching gem dragon lore, leading them to archived articles and edition-specific materials. The Obsidian Dragon story teaches us how games evolve and what gets preserved during that evolution. Not every creature survives the transition between editions. Some fall victim to design choices, others to space limitations, still others to the simple reality that not everything can be carried forward. Obsidian Dragons combined several factors that made their exclusion almost inevitable. Limited initial distribution, mechanical complexity tied to marginal systems, tonal inconsistency with their category, and minimal nostalgic support. Yet their story also demonstrates the enduring power of compelling concepts. Even without official support, even excluded from the definitive 5th edition Dragon supplement, Obsidian Dragons persist through fan memory and homebrew creativity. Dungeon masters continue incorporating them into campaigns, and their legend refuses to die completely. So you've journeyed from 1989's Frozen North to 2003's Volcanic Fury, witnessing a dragon that wore 2 completely different faces and then vanished into silence. The lawful black ice worm of Greyhawk gave way to the banished gem dragon of fire, and neither version survived to see modern Dungeons and Dragons. Their absence from Fizban's treasury marks not an ending, but a transformation from official content to community legend, from published statistics to homebrew passion. The Obsidian Dragon's legacy endures in campaigns of dungeon masters who refuse to let interesting ideas vanish, in memories of players who discovered them across the editions, and in the potential they represent for future storytelling. Perhaps someday Wizards of the Coast will revisit these volcanic terrors, restoring them to official status with updated mechanics and expanded lore. Until then, they remain what they've always been: dangerous, intelligent, and too compelling to forget entirely. Creatures whose roar echoes across editions even when official sourcebooks fall silent. If you enjoyed diving deep into this forgotten corner of Dungeons and Dragons lore, please consider liking this video and subscribing to Lore D&D for more explorations of obscure monsters, lost mechanics, and the rich history that makes this game endlessly fascinating. There are countless other creatures waiting in the shadows of older editions, each with their own stories of creation, evolution, and sometimes disappearance. Together, we'll continue unearthing these hidden gems, ensuring that even forgotten legends find voices willing to tell their tales. Thank you for listening, and may your own campaigns honor the dragons that official books left behind.